Hey guys, this is Mike coming at you today with episode 3 of Storytime Shorts. And as you know, last week was kind of like my first handhelds. The little football games were always fun, and anything pre-Atari for me. And this, we're still not talking about the Atari right here. We're going to go into that in the next episode. But what I'm going to talk about now is after my first true love of pinballs, right, which was episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
And the little handhelds, that football handhelds by Mattel and the Digital Derby, things like that. Where I fell in love was arcade games, where I deep dove into it. The arcades were just my favorite, and it was the ultimate experience back then, from about 78, 79-ish, around there, all the way to the NES era. The arcades was king still. And the first time I saw an arcade was when we moved from Tennessee to Texas. We moved to Rosenberg. There was a little gas station, little convenience store. It's basically on the property of the apartment complex we lived in. And so me and my dad went in there to get him some Cool Kings and a Coca-Cola.
Okay. So this is like when arcades were a little bit more nightlife-y.
Yeah, right. So this little convenience store had an arcade in it, and it was Sprint. It was a 2-player steering wheel, 4-gear, 4 on the floor. You could compete against the computer or an opponent. And I loved cars back then. I was a car nut. I loved Camaros and all that stuff when I was a kid. And so being it racing, and you could turn the steering wheel and race and pick your car on there, race around a track. I saw that game. It was like a magnet. Boom! I gravitated towards it, and that's when pinballs were still great, but that's when I fell in love with the arcades way more than pinball I ever did. So I'd always want to go to the store, not so much for candy and stuff, but to play Sprint arcade. And of course, I could beat my dad on it, and I could beat the computer. And so my dad thought I was really, really good on it, which for 8 years old, I wasn't bad, for an 8-year-old. And so one time this high schooler was on it, and I wanted to play it too. So it was a 2-player game, so we both could play it. And my dad said, "Hey, I bet my son can beat you," and he put $1 up for $1, and I went, "Uh-oh." My nerves started kicking in. I was like, "Oh, my dad bet $1 on me, and if I'm going to disappoint him if I don't win, will he disown me if I lose? Oh, too much pressure, right?" But hey, guess what? I was winning the whole game. I was beating this guy.
Hey.
However many, I think it was timed or the laps. I don't remember exactly, but I was getting him. I was ahead of him, just ahead of him the whole game. Well, here comes the second to the last turn. I said, "Oh, I think I'm going to get him." I started getting more nervous, and I crashed. And he zips past me and wins on the last half of the lap.
Oh.
And so my dad had to give him $1.
And you got whipped.
So it was like there was a butterfly effect. If I would have beat that kid, my dad would have loved me forever. I might have, with all the love he would have shown me, I might have become president of the United States. Or I don't know. So I disappointed my father that day. Was the biggest day. But no, I love that game. And we used to go to Westwood Mall in 79. Right after that, in Westwood Mall was a arcade called Gold Mine. If Westwood Mall was southwest part of Houston, I think maybe Chimney Rock area, somewhere around there. And it was a nice 2-story mall, but we would go, maybe once a month, and I didn't care about the mall, anything about it, hardly. I cared about Gold Mine, the arcade. And It was your classic dark arcade, dark flooring, dim lighting. And so me and my dad would have $5, and that was quite a bit whenever we'd go, and I would try to make that $5 last. We were broke back then. He was a up and coming electrician. So
Gotcha.
He was young. He was apprentice. So we didn't have that much money, but we would try to make that. I'd try to make that quarter last. Back then you would play a game. Maybe if you didn't love it, but if you were good at it, I would play that game. Just because I was good at it.
Mm-hmm.
or if you loved a game and you kind of sucked at it, you're like, oh no, and you dump quarters in it. You know? So there was so many games back then. You know, I remember my dad loving. It was a vector game, battle. It was a tank game. I just lost the name.
Battlezone.
Battlezone. That's it. You got it.
Yep.
So he loved Battlezone. He was in the army, so he was around tanks all the time and stuff. But he loved Battlezone because it looked pretty cool. I was never good at that one.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the arcades back then in 79, 80 was still full of pinballs. So I would play pinballs all the time still. But man, when the new arcade came in, and back then it was constant arcades coming in, stuff that you won't remember now, that wasn't too popular. You know, dumb things like Rally X. I was good at that game. It wasn't that much fun, but I would play Rally X all the time, a little car game. It was almost like a Pac-Man car game. And there was just asteroids. I loved it, but I sucked at it. So what I learned was, let me shoot all the asteroids except for one little tiny one, and I can go 360 on the screen, and it becomes a UFO after you. So you just have to shoot that UFO. So you'd make games last a long time that way. Or on Dig Dug, I'd just stay on the first screen and kill, just to try to get all the dirt off the screen.
Right.
You know, stuff like that. So you just make your quarter last because you knew you didn't have a lot of time. But Defender was one I loved Defender, but I sucked so bad at it. You know, only the older kids understood that. You know how to play that one. It was difficult. Had too many buttons for a kid. That game was just so ahead of its time. I'm trying to think of early, like 79, 80, 81 arcade games, things like that.
Star Wars immediately comes to mind.
Yeah, the vector game, that was great. Stuff like that. Pole Position was another one. My dad was actually better than me at pole position, surprisingly, but he played that one all the time. All the early ones, Galaga, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man.
Space Invaders.
Space Invaders. You had you had Tempest. I loved Tempest. It scared me for some reason. You know, all the little things coming up. It was dark when you're looking down. Had an odd feeling to me, but I loved it, and I would just spin that potentiometer, and that little shooter would go around, and I'd just shoot. It just whatever. It didn't matter what the game was. If it sucked, if it was great, if it was okay, I would play them all. You know, especially if they were in a grocery store, convenience store. Back then, you had video games in Jack in the Box. You had arcade machines. I remember as a kid. Jack in the Box had arcade games. Every Stop and Go or 7-Eleven would have 2 arcade games. They have a little special corner built in to 7-Elevens that would have arcade games. 2 arcades, and they would get switched out every couple of months. There'd be new ones in there, you know.
Right.
And stuff. So that was, you know, just the king to me was arcades. And then when the NES came out, it kind of, you're like, oh, these home games are getting great. You know, 'cause the Atari was good, but nowhere near. The arcades just destroyed Atari. Arcades would destroy NES games most of the time, but there was some, like say Excite Bike, you know, that was arcade exact. Certain ones, especially the Versus, you know, those were pretty much just are same as the cartridge. But you know, that's what I loved back then. That's how I started video games. Actual true arcade or actual true video games was this game right here. It was black and white, just like that, Sprint. They had different versions of that, single player. They had 4-player versions, they had color version. But in 79, this was what I think was the most common, was this 2-player black and white version, and I love that one. Hey, by the way, they made an Atari 2600 version. It's called Indy 500. It's basically this game. Well, you can't see the back of it, but it has multiple tracks on it, and you had the paddle here. This paddle is different, you know that, compared to Warlords or this typical paddle. With this one, keeps spinning. The other one has a stop on it. So this one will keep going in a circle. So this one is only good, when it says driving, only good for Indy 500.
Yep.
So that's why we packaged it in there, and this is really cool. So if you do like this old school game, the Sprint game, this Indy 500 for the Atari is basically the same thing. So hey, if you want to come down and pick that up, we're here at Player One in Friendswood at 101 West Parkwood Avenue, and our phone number is 281-992-4263. It'll be a great time.